You know that exact moment when you realize your husband treats you like you're about as sharp as a bowling ball? Well, I discovered that Blake apparently mistook me for furniture, specifically the kind that can't see or hear. My name is Zoe. I'm 32, and until 3 weeks ago, I genuinely believed I was living in a reasonably functional marriage. Turns out, I was actually starring in my very own soap opera, except nobody bothered to hand me the script. It was a Wednesday afternoon when my perfectly organized world decided to perform its best demolition site cosplay. I was rummaging for my phone charger in Blake's car. You know, that innocent little search that has ruined more marriages than any reality TV show. That's when I found something that made my stomach drop faster than my faith in humanity. A receipt. Not just any receipt. A Victoria's Secret receipt for $180 worth of lingerie. Now, before you think, oh, how sweet. He's planning something romantic. Let me paint you the full picture. The lingerie was size XS. I'm a solid size M and proud of it. Unless Blake planned to shrink me in the wash, this shopping spree definitely wasn't for me. But it gets better. The receipt had a name on it. My gorgeous Tiffany. And there, in Blake's handwriting, which I know better than my own coffee order, was a little heart. A heart. This man, who forgets to write "love you" on my birthday cards, suddenly became Shakespeare for his side piece. I sat in that car for a full 10 minutes staring at that piece of paper, hoping it might magically transform into a grocery list or something equally innocent. But no, it remained stubbornly itself. Proof that my husband of 6 years was cheating on me with someone named Tiffany, who apparently shops in the juniors section. Now, most wives would either confront their husband immediately or have a dramatic meltdown in the driveway. But I work in event planning, which means I've got two very important skills: staying composed under pressure and plotting elaborate schemes that would make a military strategist weep with envy. So instead of screaming, crying, or tossing his golf clubs into the neighbor's pool, I did something far more productive. I became a detective. Nancy Drew wishes she had my motivation. First step, check our joint credit card statements. Oh, what a treasure trove that turned out to be. Apparently, Blake had been living a double life for months. Fancy dinners at restaurants I'd never heard of. Hotel rooms booked on days he claimed to be working late. And my personal favorite, a weekend spa trip he insisted was a boring work conference in Cleveland. Cleveland, my foot. The man went to Napa Valley with Miss Size XS while I stayed home, alphabetizing our spice cabinet and feeling guilty about eating ice cream for dinner. But the real kicker came when I did a little social media stalking. And yes, before you judge me, desperate times call for desperate measures. I was feeling very desperate. Tiffany Morrison, that's her full name, 26 years old, works as a dental hygienist, and apparently runs an Instagram dedicated to her fitness journey and living her best life. Every single photo looks professionally shot, which either means she's a wizard with a selfie stick or someone's coaching her like a Vogue photographer. Want to guess who that someone might be? I scrolled through months of her posts, and it read like a highlight reel of my husband's vanishing acts. That hiking trip he took with a college buddy? There was Tiffany on the exact same trail the same weekend, wearing what suspiciously looked like Blake's favorite hiking jacket. The work dinner that ran late last month. Tiffany posted a photo of a fancy steak dinner with the caption, "Best date night ever," at the same restaurant our card showed charges for. The woman was basically live tweeting her affair with my husband, and I'd been far too trusting to notice. But what really made my skin crawl wasn't just the cheating. It was the sheer idiocy of it all. Blake thought he was being clever, orchestrating some grand deception. Meanwhile, his girlfriend was uploading incriminating receipts and selfies like she was running a lab experiment. These two weren't criminal masterminds. They were criminal amateurs at best. That's when a crucial realization hit me. If you're going to play games, make sure your opponent doesn't have access to professional-grade audio-visual equipment and 6 years' worth of pent-up irritation. Because while Blake was playing checkers, I'd been unknowingly training for chess. And Tiffany? She was about to learn that being the other woman loses its shine fast when the wife moonlights as a master of making people's lives complicated. Event planning taught me how to think 3 moves ahead. While Blake was worrying about how to sneak around, I was already drafting his downfall. My plan had exactly 1 week: gather evidence, stage the perfect setup, and orchestrate what I politely call the confrontation. If Blake wanted to treat our marriage like a joke, I was going to make sure the punchline landed squarely on him, and he had absolutely no idea he'd just challenged the wrong player. Over the next 7 days, I morphed from loving wife into surveillance specialist quicker than Blake could say, "Working late again, honey." Once you start actually watching someone, their lies glow like neon signs. Monday was a demonstration. Blake came home at 7:30 p.m., claiming he'd been finishing quarterly reports. His shirt was rumpled, his hair messed, and he smelled like vanilla perfume. Unless quarterly reports now come with a complimentary spritz of Victoria's Secret, I think I knew where he'd been. When I asked about his day, he launched into this overcooked saga of spreadsheets and client calls, more detail about a fake day than he'd given about his real job in months. Honestly, the man should quit corporate and write fiction. The comedy reached peak on Wednesday when I decided to test his lying chops. I told him I was surprising him at work with lunch. You should have seen his face. He looked like I'd announced I was planning to torch his office. "Oh, you don't need to do that," he said, practically sweating through his shirt. I was going to be in meetings all day. Back-to-back meetings. Very important ones. You know how it is. Because nothing screams high-stakes corporate life like the motel receipt I later found in his pants pocket. The beauty of living with someone for 6 years is that you know all their tells. Blake touches his nose when he's lying. Always has. He also speeds up his speech and unloads way too many unnecessary details. Wednesday night, he gave me a 15-minute monologue about his lunch meeting with the Henderson account, including what everyone ordered, how long they waited for their table, and even the exact temperature of his coffee. I almost applauded. The man had crafted an entire alternate universe where he was the hardest-working employee in corporate America. Meanwhile, I was conducting real detective work. I'd installed a tracking app on our shared iPad, the one Blake never touches but always leaves connected to his phone. Suddenly, I had a front-row seat to his daily adventures around town. Monday, the motel on 5th Street. Tuesday, Tiffany's apartment complex. Wednesday, a fancy Italian restaurant downtown. Thursday, back to the motel. Friday, Tiffany's place again. The man's social calendar as a cheater was far more exciting than our married life had been in the past year. But the absolute best part? Watching him attempt to cover his tracks at home. Blake, who usually can't remember to take out the trash without a sticky note, suddenly acquired the organizational skills of a Pentagon operative. He carried his phone everywhere, even into the bathroom. He changed his passcode. He did his own laundry for the first time in our entire relationship. When I asked why he was suddenly so household helpful, he said he was trying to pitch in more. Sweet, right? Except the only clothes he was laundering were the ones smelling faintly of vanilla perfume and guilt. The irony wasn't lost on me. My husband was putting more effort into hiding his affair than he had into our marriage in months. When was the last time he planned a surprise for me? Bought flowers? Took me somewhere nice? Or even remembered my perfume? Meanwhile, Tiffany got the royal treatment. Fresh flowers twice a week. I may have driven past her apartment a few times during lunch. Expensive dinners, weekend getaways, thoughtful gifts, all chronicled on her Instagram with captions like, "Someone spoils me too much." Yeah, someone spoils her too much, with my husband's time and our joint credit card. The more I watched this ridiculous display, the angrier I got. Not just at Blake, but at the sheer audacity of it all. He treated me like I was invisible while playing Prince Charming to a woman who posts selfies captioned, "Just being me," and thinks deep thoughts come with sunset filters. I started documenting everything. Screenshots of his location, photos of receipts, credit card statements, even a few pictures I snapped when I followed him to one of their little rendezvous spots. Not because I'm a stalker, but because I learned long ago that when you deal with liars, evidence is everything. And Blake? He was lying about everything. The overtime he claimed? His company's HR confirmed he'd actually been leaving early most days for the past 3 months. The business trips. I checked his work calendar. Nothing scheduled. The weekend he claimed to be helping his brother move? His brother posted family vacation photos from Florida that same weekend. Every story was a fabrication. Blake had built an alternate universe where he was simultaneously the most devoted employee and the most helpful family member in America, all while actually playing house with a woman who thinks inspirational quotes count as personality traits. Funny thing, I think Blake started to believe his own fiction. He'd come home and spin these elaborate tales with such conviction, I almost wondered if he'd genuinely forgotten what really happened. Maybe that's how cheaters survive. They live in their made-up world so long reality becomes negotiable. But reality was about to show up, and it was bringing friends. While Blake was busy being a part-time husband and full-time liar, I was plotting something that would make his little deception read like amateur hour. He wanted games? Fine. But when you challenge someone who organizes events for a living, you better be ready for a show you'll never forget. The stage was set, the players in position, and Blake had absolutely no idea his final performance was about to start. By Thursday of week 2, I had enough evidence to start my own private investigation firm. Blake's affair wasn't just confirmed. It was documented, cataloged, and organized with a precision that would make a librarian weep with joy. But evidence is only half the battle. The other half is knowing how to use it. I could have done the cliché thing. Confront him at home, fling his clothes on the lawn, and scream about trust and betrayal like every wronged wife in every movie. But where's the artistry in that? Where's the poetic justice? Blake had been treating me like an idiot for months, lying to my face, draining our joint accounts, and telling Tiffany I was emotionally distant and didn't understand him. I know this because he forgot to log out of his email on our shared computer. Tiffany, it turns out, is very chatty. According to their messages, I'm apparently a workaholic who can't appreciate Blake's needs and ambitions. Funny, since I was the one who supported him through 3 job changes, covered our mortgage when he decided to find himself for 6 months, and listened to 6 straight years of complaints about his boss, coworkers, and family. But sure, Blake, I'm the problem. The beauty of being underestimated is that nobody sees you coming. Blake thought I was too trusting, too naive, and too focused on my career to notice his sideshow. He'd grown comfortable and sloppy, leaving evidence like breadcrumbs, maybe subconsciously wanting to be caught so he wouldn't have to end things himself. Well, congratulations, Blake. You're about to get exactly what you wished for. If he wanted to play the role of the deceived husband escaping a terrible marriage, I'd give him an audience worthy of his performance. And Tiffany, who'd been posting about her mysterious boyfriend and how she was finally being treated like a queen, deserved to learn exactly what kind of king she'd picked. The plan was elegantly simple. Blake had mentioned, in one of his rare honest moments, that his company was holding their quarterly team meeting next Friday afternoon in the parking lot, some kind of outdoor team-building exercise that his boss, Mr. Harrison, his boss, was apparently thrilled. Perfect. A captive audience of Blake's coworkers, his manager, and anyone else in earshot. That's where my event planning skills earned their paycheck. I have access to portable sound systems, wireless mics, and projectors that most people only see at concerts. I also have vendor contacts, catering options, and an unusually understanding assistant named Marcus who rarely asks questions when I request odd equipment pairings. So you need a wireless sound system, a portable projector, and catering for what kind of event exactly? Marcus asked. Call it a surprise documentary screening, I said. Very exclusive guest list. Very personal content. Marcus knows that tone. When I use it, it's best to process the order and not ask follow-ups. The genius of the plan was the timing. Blake had been telling me for weeks that Friday would be a long day with mandatory overtime. Meanwhile, his location data showed a pattern. Every Friday at 3 p.m., he'd meet Tiffany at the coffee shop 2 blocks from his office. Their texts, yes, I'd already cracked his new passcode by watching him type it, revealed this Friday was special. It was Tiffany's birthday. Blake had booked a room at that fancy downtown hotel with the rooftop bar and skyline view, and told her they'd celebrate her promotion. My husband was celebrating another woman's career while I paid our bills, but Blake made a fatal error. His company's team meeting was set for 2:30 p.m., which meant he'd have to choose between showing up or slipping off to meet Tiffany. Guess which he picked. Thursday night, he came home practically vibrating as he spun another elaborate tale about Friday's mandatory training and how he'd be unreachable. He was probably envisioning the rooftop reservation and whatever future fantasy he planned to sell Tiffany. "That's fine, honey," I replied, honeyed sweetness dialed to 11. "I'll probably be working late, too. Big event this weekend, you know how it is." Blake nodded, the supportive spouse act on cue. "You work so hard, Zoe. I hope someday you find better work-life balance," he said. The irony was so thick I could have plated it. That night I finished the final prep. Marcus would rig the equipment at Blake's building by 2 p.m. I confirmed the catering. Nothing extravagant, just coffee and pastries to keep Blake's coworkers alert for the show. I charged every device, organized my evidence, and rehearsed my presentation. Yes, this was a presentation, a carefully staged reveal that would unmask not just the affair but his lies, financial betrayals, and utter disrespect. I even chose an outfit. If you're going to demolish someone's reputation, you might as well look professional doing it. Friday morning, Blake kissed me goodbye like he did every day, told me he loved me, and reminded me he'd be stuck in meetings all afternoon. "Have a great day at work." "Sweetheart," I said, smiling like the devoted wife I'd been for 6 years. Little did Blake know, this would be the last lie he ever told me. In about 4 hours, his entire carefully constructed world would implode, and everyone he'd been deceiving would have front row seats to the show. Friday afternoon arrived with that perfect, cinematic weather that makes you believe the universe has a flair for dramatic timing. Clear skies, a gentle breeze, ideal for an outdoor team meeting, and even better for public humiliation. I arrived at Blake's office building at exactly 2:15 p.m., 15 minutes before the quarterly meeting was scheduled to start. Marcus had already executed setup with military precision, portable speakers strategically positioned around the parking lot, the wireless microphone system tested and ready, and a projection screen visible from every angle. "Everything's good to go." "Boss," Marcus said, handing me the remote controls. "Sound system's connected to your phone, projectors ready for your presentation, and catering is set up by the main entrance." "Perfect," I said, watching Blake's coworkers start trickling into the parking lot. "And you remember what to do at 2:35, Marcus added with a grin. "Cafe Luna table near the window. Order a large coffee, keep your phone connected to mine on speaker." I'll position myself close enough to catch their conversation clearly. "You're a lifesaver, Marcus. This is either going to be brilliant, or we're both unemployed." "Worth the risk," he said, checking his watch. "Better head over there now. Blake should be arriving any minute." I stationed myself near the back of the crowd, close enough to see everything, but far enough to make a discreet exit if necessary. Blake's boss was arranging his own presentation materials, completely oblivious to the very unexpected turn his afternoon was about to take. At 2:25 p.m., I spotted Blake's car rolling into the lot across the street, not the company lot, but the public parking next to the coffee shop where he always met Tiffany. Perfect timing. I activated the wireless microphone system and double-checked the projection screen. Everything was ready. Exactly at 2:30 p.m., Mr. Harrison called the meeting to order. "Thank you all for being here today," he said to the roughly 30 employees. "I know it's unusual to hold our quarterly meeting outdoors, but a change of scenery can be good for team morale." That's when I stepped forward and activated my microphone. "I hope you don't mind if I add a presentation to today's agenda," I announced, my voice carrying clearly across the parking lot. The crowd turned toward me, confused but intrigued. Mr. Harrison looked puzzled but nodded politely. After all, I looked professional, confident, and my equipment made me appear completely official. "My name is Zoe Chen, and I am Blake Morrison's wife," I continued, noting how several faces shifted in recognition. Blake had surely mentioned me during his good husband performances at work events. Blake cannot be here today because he is currently across the street at Cafe Luna, meeting with his girlfriend Tiffany, in what their text messages describe as a celebration of their future together. I clicked the remote, and the projection screen illuminated a slide displaying Blake's location data from the past month. A neat map with pins marking every hotel, restaurant, and apartment complex he'd visited during his supposed overtime hours. The parking lot fell completely silent. "Now I know what you're thinking," I continued, warming up to my audience. "Maybe there's some misunderstanding. Maybe Blake really is working all those extra hours he's been claiming. So let me show you his actual work schedule, which I obtained through a very polite conversation with your HR department." I clicked to the next slide. Blake's official work schedule, showing that he'd been leaving early or calling in sick on every single day he claimed to be working overtime. Someone in the crowd whispered. "Oh my gosh, but wait, there's more," I said, channeling my inner infomercial host. "Blake has also been financing this relationship with funds from our joint accounts. Here's a breakdown of his purchases over the past 3 months." I clicked to a detailed spreadsheet displaying hotel charges, restaurant bills, jewelry purchases, and that $180 Victoria's Secret receipt, all organized by date with Tiffany's corresponding Instagram posts alongside them. Mr. Harrison stared at the screen, mouth agape. Several of Blake's coworkers were snapping photos with their phones. "The beautiful thing about social media," I continued, "is that it creates such a detailed record of people's lives. For example, here's Tiffany's post from last weekend when Blake told me he was at a work conference in Chicago." The next slide showed Tiffany's Instagram photo of her and Blake at a spa resort in North Carolina, arms wrapped around each other in matching robes, captioned, "Weekend getaway with my love." Someone behind me gasped, "Is that actually Blake?" "Oh yes," I confirmed. But here's my favorite part. Blake has been telling Tiffany that he's planning to divorce me and that I'm, and I quote from their emails, "a workaholic who doesn't understand his emotional needs." I clicked to a screenshot of Blake's email to Tiffany, describing me as distant and career-obsessed while he claimed to be pursuing happiness. Interesting perspective, I noted, considering I've been covering his share of our mortgage payments for the past 4 months, while he spent our savings on his emotional discovery journey. I displayed the bank statements showing the financial reality, my income covering everything, while Blake's contributions mysteriously decreased at exactly the same time his extracurricular expenses increased. The crowd was riveted. Some looked horrified, others fascinated by the audacity of the presentation. Mr. Harrison seemed torn between finding it the most entertaining or the most mortifying thing to ever happen at a company meeting. "Now, I know Blake can't be here to defend himself," I said, "because he's currently explaining to Tiffany their romantic plans for tonight. Fortunately, I have an associate positioned at Cafe Luna who will help us understand exactly what Blake's priorities really are." I held up my phone, showing the active call connection to Marcus. "Ladies and gentlemen, live from Table 7 at Cafe Luna, here's what Blake Morrison is telling his girlfriend about his future plans, while his coworkers are waiting for him at a mandatory work meeting." Marcus's voice came through clearly on the line. Then, perfectly timed, Blake's voice filled the parking lot through the wireless speakers. "Told Zoe I'd be stuck in meetings all afternoon, so we have plenty of time. I can't wait to get out of this job anyway. These people are so boring, and Harrison thinks he's so important with his stupid team meetings." The crowd reacted instantly, gasps, murmurs of shock, and what sounded like someone trying not to laugh. Blake's voice continued. "Once we're together officially, I won't have to pretend to care about any of this corporate nonsense. You and I can start fresh somewhere new." Tiffany's voice joined in. "But what about Zoe? Have you told her yet about us?" "She'll figure it out eventually. Honestly, Tiff, she's so wrapped up in her own work that she probably won't even notice. I'm gone until the bills start piling up." The silence in the parking lot was deafening. Mr. Harrison stepped forward and took my microphone. "Well," he said to the crowd, "I think we can consider today's team-building exercise a complete success. We've certainly learned a lot about teamwork, trust, and professional integrity." He paused and looked directly at me. Mrs. Morrison, would you be available to discuss Blake's employment status with me after this presentation? I smiled and spoke into my phone. Marcus, you can hang up now. Mission accomplished. I think Blake might be discussing his employment status with you himself very soon, Mr. Harrison. The aftermath was more spectacular than I could have imagined. Blake came running across the street exactly 17 minutes after I'd finished my presentation. Probably because someone at the coffee shop had recorded my little show and posted it online faster than you could say viral workplace drama. He arrived to find his entire company's staff still standing in the parking lot, many now enjoying the coffee and pastries I'd provided, discussing the finer points of my evidence collection as if reviewing a Netflix documentary. "Zoe," he shouted, face red and panicked. "What are you doing here?" "What is all this?" "Oh, hi, honey," I said sweetly, packing up my presentation materials with the casual efficiency of someone who'd just finished a successful corporate training seminar. "How was your meeting with Tiffany? Did you two make any interesting decisions about your future?" Blake looked around at his coworkers, all of whom were staring at him with expressions ranging from amusement to disgust. And I watched the exact moment he realized his carefully constructed double life had been obliterated in front of his professional network. This is crazy," he stammered. You can't do this here at my workplace." "Actually," Mr. Harrison interrupted, stepping forward with a folder in his hands, "I think we need to have a conversation. Blake, my office, now." Blake tried to protest, tried to explain, tried to salvage something from the wreckage of his deception. But it's hard to argue with time-stamped evidence and audio recordings of yourself, describing your coworkers as boring idiots while ditching team meetings to meet your girlfriend. The meeting with Mr. Harrison lasted exactly 43 minutes. Blake emerged from the building carrying a cardboard box with his personal belongings, wearing a facial expression that suggested he'd just been introduced to consequences for the first time in his adult life. Meanwhile, I drove home to find Tiffany sitting on my front porch, looking like someone had just explained that her mysterious boyfriend came with very non-mysterious baggage. "Are you Zoe?" she asked as I got out of the car. "Guilty as charged," I replied. "Let me guess. Blake's been telling you stories about his terrible wife who doesn't understand him?" Tiffany looked down at her hands. "He said you guys were separated. He said you were getting divorced and just living together until the paperwork was final." "Interesting," I said, unlocking my front door, because I never agreed to a separation, never filed for divorce, and definitely never agreed to subsidize his dating life with our joint credit cards. "I didn't know," she said quietly. "I really didn't know he was still— he made it sound like you two were already over." I studied her face for a moment. Tiffany looked genuinely upset, genuinely surprised. Maybe she really hadn't known the full extent of Blake's lies. Maybe she'd been as deceived as I had, just in a different way. "Look," I said finally, "Blake's been lying to both of us. The difference is you get to walk away from this mess. I get to divorce it." Tiffany nodded and stood. "I'm sorry," she said. "I really am. I know that doesn't fix anything, but—" "Actually," I interrupted, "it fixes more than you might think. Because now I know that when Blake inevitably tries to make this whole thing my fault, at least one person knows the truth about what he's been telling people." 6 months later, I was sitting in my new apartment, smaller than the house I'd shared with Blake, but entirely mine, reading the final divorce decree. Blake had tried to claim he deserved half of everything because he'd been emotionally neglected during our marriage. The judge was unimpressed, especially after my lawyer presented the financial records showing Blake's emotional neglect had cost our joint accounts about $15,000. As for Blake himself, he'd moved in with his brother after losing his job and being unable to afford his own place. Apparently, being publicly exposed as a liar and embezzler doesn't improve your employment prospects. Tiffany, surprisingly, had texted me last month. She'd started dating someone new, someone who, according to her message, had actually finalized a divorce before asking her out. The final irony? Blake kept calling me for weeks after everything fell apart, insisting we could work things out, and that I'd overreacted to what he called a temporary lapse in judgment. a temporary lapse in judgment, 6 months of systematic lying, cheating and stealing reduced to a phrase. I told him he was absolutely right. His judgment had definitely lapsed. Permanently. These days, when people ask me about my marriage, I tell them Blake taught me something valuable about trust. It's not about believing everything someone tells you. It's about making sure that if they lie to you, they're at least smart enough not to document it on social media. Turns out I married the wrong kind of storyteller, but I became exactly the right kind of narrator.
And that wraps up today's story. Now we want to hear from you. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments, and let's see how far these stories reach. If this story moved you or gave you chills, give it a like, share, and subscribe for more powerful stories. One last thing, rate the story from 1 to 10 in the comments. Your feedback helps us bring you even better ones next time. Thanks for watching. We appreciate you being part of this storytelling journey.